Okay, y'all, you are not going to believe the absolutely gut-wrenching, insane story I'm about to unpack for you. This isn't some made-up drama. This is how I found out the person I called my best friend, my sister, for 10 years, systematically dismantled my entire life, piece by piece, out of pure cold revenge. You think you know someone? You really don't. This wasn't just a financial hit. This was an invasion, a violation, and it exposed a level of darkness I never thought existed in someone I loved so deeply. I've debated sharing this for a long time because it's still incredibly raw, but you need to hear it. This isn't just a story. This was my life, and it was built on a mountain of lies planted by someone I trusted implicitly. If you're ready for the whole, unfiltered truth, and trust me, it's a lot. Hit that like, subscribe right now, and honestly, share this with anyone who needs to hear it. You won't want to miss a single detail of this absolute nightmare. Seriously, maybe grab a drink or a snack. This is gonna be a long ride. All right, deep breath. Here's where it all began. It was the fall of 2011. I had just moved to Atlanta, Georgia for a fresh start after a particularly brutal breakup. I knew maybe 3 people in the entire state, all loose connections from college. I was lonely, I was a little lost, and I was working a soul-sucking job as a junior graphic designer that paid just enough to cover my ridiculously small, slightly too expensive apartment in Buckhead. I needed a friend. Like, a real friend. Met Chloe at a pottery class. Yeah, I know. Sounds adorable, right? We were both terrible. Like, spectacularly bad at centering clay. We just kept collapsing our pots into sad, lopsided blobs. We bonded over our shared incompetence and spent most of the 2-hour class just laughing at each other's failures. She had this infectious, loud laugh and a wild mop of curly red hair that seemed to have a personality of its own. She was an artist, a freelance illustrator, or trying to be one. And she just had this bohemian, free spirit vibe that was so different from my more structured, slightly anxious personality. After class, we grabbed coffee, and then another coffee, and then dinner. We talked for hours that first night about our hopes, our fears, our terrible exes, our slightly dysfunctional families. It felt instantaneous, like we'd known each other forever. You know that feeling, when you meet someone and you just click? Like you're speaking the same language? That was Chloe and me. She told me about growing up in Savannah, about wanting to be a famous artist since she was a kid, about struggling to make ends meet as a freelancer. I told her about my move, my breakup, my boring job, my dreams of maybe starting my own small design studio someday. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. We were doing everything together. Weekend trips to Charleston, trying every single obscure restaurant in Atlanta, binge-watching terrible reality TV shows, going to art festivals. She was the friend I had always craved but never really had. She was bold where I was timid, spontaneous where I was planned, hilarious where I was, well, more reserved. She pushed me outside my comfort zone, encouraged me to be more adventurous. I felt like I could tell her absolutely anything. My deepest secrets, my most embarrassing moments, my financial worries, which honestly weren't many back then. I was young, single, and lived pretty simply. She was my emergency contact, the first person I called with good news or bad news. We even talked about getting a place together someday to save on rent. She knew everything. My family history, my credit card numbers, because we'd split bills online sometimes and she'd spot me and I'd pay her back. My social security number. I mean, not explicitly, but she helped me fill out some rental applications once, sitting right next to me, and saw it. My birthday, my first pet's name, my mom's maiden name. All the little details that make up your digital and personal identity. Back then, it felt completely normal. She was my best friend. There was no reason to hide anything. Trust was the foundation of our entire relationship. 10 years of shared memories, inside jokes, late-night talks, crying sessions, celebrating successes, comforting failures. We were like sisters. People who knew us always said, "Oh, the two of you are a package deal." She became part of my routine, my comfort zone. My family back home knew Chloe's name. My few other friends knew Chloe. She was woven into the fabric of my life. She celebrated my small victories, like finally getting a slightly better-paying design gig at a small agency downtown in 2013, or adopting my cat, Marmalade, in 2015. She was there for me when I had minor health scares, when I went through subsequent less dramatic breakups. But even in those early years, looking back now with the horrific clarity of hindsight, there were tiny little flickers. Things I dismissed, things I rationalized away because I loved her and genuinely believed she was just a little chaotic and maybe a bit unlucky. Things that, if they were happening now, knowing what I know, would have sent me running for the hills. But back then they were just Chloe being Chloe. And because the trust was so deep, because the friendship felt so real and supportive, I never questioned the foundation. I never imagined that the person laughing with me, crying with me, sharing their life with me, was simultaneously cataloging every piece of information about me, waiting for the right moment to use it as a weapon. And believe me, she was. So, yeah, we were glued at the hip, my ride or die, my platonic soulmate. But as the years went by, say, around 2015 or 2016, I started noticing things. Nothing major, nothing I could point to and say, "That's a red flag." Not yet, but just inconsistencies. Chloe was always struggling financially. That wasn't new. The freelance art world is tough, especially when you're starting out. I totally got that. I helped her out occasionally, buying her groceries when she was really broke, spotting her rent for a couple of days, lending her small amounts of cash. It felt like what friends do. I wasn't rolling in money myself, but I was stable. I had a steady job. I was good with saving. I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck like she seemed to be constantly. But sometimes, the stories about why she was broke didn't quite add up. One week it would be a client who stiffed her. The next, a sudden emergency car repair, even though I rarely saw her car. Then it would be a health issue that required an unexpected doctor's visit she couldn't afford. Individually, these things happen. But for Chloe, it felt like there was always something. And it always seemed to conveniently pop up right around the time rent was due, or when I mentioned planning a weekend trip I wanted her to come on. She also started asking for weird favors. Not big things again, just little ones that felt slightly intrusive in retrospect. Like, "Hey, can I get a package sent to your place? My building's mailroom is being renovated." Or, "Can you let me use your Amazon account real quick? Mine's acting up." Or, "Oh, my phone died. Can I quickly log into your bank app on your phone just to check something super fast?" I never thought twice about it. Of course she could send a package here. Of course she could use my Amazon for a second. Of course she could use my phone. I was sitting right there. It was Chloe. Why would I say no? One specific instance stands out now. It was maybe 2017. She was trying to get approved for a small business loan for some art supplies and equipment. She was venting to me about how hard it was, how her credit score wasn't great. She admitted she'd had some issues paying bills on time in the past, which I just saw as part of the struggling artist narrative. She asked if I could just look at her loan application online with her. She said she was confused by some of the questions, so I sat with her, on her laptop, and we went through it. She had a terrible time navigating the site, so I ended up practically filling it out for her, talking her through each field. I saw her social security number there, her address, her previous addresses, details about her income, which seemed optimistic compared to what she usually told me she made. It felt completely innocent at the time, just helping a friend navigate confusing paperwork. But it meant I had seen, typed, and confirmed all her most sensitive information. And she knew I had seen it. There was also this undercurrent of competitiveness. Sometimes when something good happened to me, a promotion, a date that went well, buying a slightly nicer used car, She would be outwardly supportive, but there would be this subtle shift in her tone, maybe a backhanded compliment, or she'd immediately launch into something negative about her own life that completely overshadowed my news. I remember telling her I got a raise in 2018, enough that I could finally start putting serious money into savings and thinking about a down payment on a small condo someday. She congratulated me, but it felt a little forced. Then she immediately started talking about how she was considering bankruptcy because she was so deep in debt and had no idea how she was going to survive. I felt terrible for her, of course, and spent the rest of the conversation trying to offer solutions or just listen, completely forgetting my own good news. It happened enough times that I started to hesitate sharing positive updates with her, which felt weird, but I just told myself I didn't want to make her feel bad when she was already struggling. She also started becoming really interested in my finances. Not in a helpful way, like asking for budget tips. More in a scrutinizing way. She'd ask how much I paid for things, how much was in my savings, what my bills were. It felt nosy sometimes, but I figured she was just trying to figure out how to manage her own money better by looking at someone who seemed to have it together. I told her roughly what I made, how much I saved each month, the general state of my credit score, which was excellent, something I was proud of. I was an open book, because she was my best friend. Why would I keep anything from her? Looking back, these weren't just quirks or the struggles of a friend. They were data collection. They were tests. She was gathering information, seeing how much I would reveal, seeing how much I would help, assessing my financial stability compared to her own lack thereof. She was building a profile of me. And I, completely blinded by a decade of friendship and trust, was handing her the blueprint to my entire life, piece by piece. The red flags weren't subtle because they were small. They were subtle because my love and trust for her were so huge, they completely obscured them. I was so focused on being a good friend, on helping her, that I couldn't see what was slowly, subtly, being taken from me. All those little inconsistencies, the weird favors, the constant financial drama, the intense curiosity about my money, they all seemed like unrelated threads at the time. Annoying sometimes, sure, but not threatening. They were just Chloe, being Chloe. And I, like an absolute idiot, just kept weaving those threads into the tapestry of our friendship, never realizing she was using them to tie me up. The major turning point, the moment the foundation of my reality began to really crumble, started with what seemed like another one of her typical, slightly inconvenient requests. This was maybe late 2019, early 2020, right before the world went completely insane. Chloe was living in a different part of the city by then, a cheaper apartment further out. She called me one day, sounding panicked. She said she had ordered some expensive art supplies, like a specialized drawing tablet and software, that she needed for a big potential commission she was trying to get. She claimed the vendor wouldn't ship to her address because there had been issues with lost packages in her building before, and they only shipped to verified residential addresses with a solid delivery history. She asked if she could have the package shipped to my apartment, just this one time. She promised to come over the minute it arrived, maybe even camp out at my place to make sure she didn't miss the delivery truck. It sounded plausible enough. My building was secure. I was usually home during the day because I was freelancing more myself by then, or could easily work from home. It seemed like a small thing to do for my best friend, especially if it meant she might land this big commission. So I said yes. Of course, I said yes. She placed the order and sent me the tracking number. I didn't think anything more of it. A few days later, the package arrived. It was a surprisingly large box, heavy too. I texted Chloe to let her know it was here. She replied almost instantly, super excited, thanking me profusely. She said she was tied up with something but would come pick it up first thing the next morning. The next morning came and went. No Chloe. I texted her again. No response for hours. Finally, she replied, apologizing profusely. She said she had a last-minute meeting, then her car broke down, then something else came up. Could she get it tomorrow? Okay, fine. Tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into the day after, then the weekend. Each time there was a new, increasingly elaborate excuse. Her phone died, she had a migraine, her cat was sick, a family emergency she couldn't talk about. I started to get a little annoyed. It was a big box, taking up space in my small apartment, and honestly, I was a little worried about having something expensive belonging to someone else just sitting there. I told her I really needed her to come get it. She promised. Hand on. Heart, absolutely, Monday morning. No Chloe. By now, I was properly frustrated. I called her, straight to voicemail. I texted, no reply. This was unusual. Even when she was being flaky, she usually responded eventually. I started to worry a little bit. Was she okay? Hours went by. Still nothing. Around lunchtime, feeling a mix of concern and irritation, I decided to just look at the package more closely. It had my name and address on it, of course. But I noticed the return address. It wasn't a vendor or a store I recognized. It was just a P.O. box in Delaware. That struck me as a little odd for expensive equipment, but maybe it was a specialized supplier? Then I saw a small label I hadn't noticed before, stuck near the shipping label. It looked like a separate mailing label. It was addressed to Chloe, but at a different address entirely. An address in a neighboring town I didn't recognize. Below her name and that address, there was a small note printed. Forwarding service account. A string of numbers. Wait. Forwarding service? Why would she use a forwarding service? And why would she have it shipped to me first, only to be forwarded to another address? My stomach did a little flip. It didn't make sense. Why the elaborate story about her building's mailroom? Why ship it to my residential address if it was just going to be forwarded anyway? Couldn't she have just used the forwarding service? Directly from the vendor. A cold, heavy dread started settling in. This wasn't adding up. The elaborate excuses, the sudden radio silence, the weird forwarding label. It felt wrong. Deeply, sickeningly wrong. This wasn't just Chloe being flaky. This was something else. Something deliberate. I carefully, almost hesitantly, peeled back the forwarding label. Underneath it was the original shipping label from the sender, and it wasn't addressed to Chloe. It was addressed to someone else entirely. A name I didn't know. And the shipping address was indeed my apartment, with my name. The package wasn't even for Chloe. My hands started to shake. What the hell was going on? Why was this package, addressed to some stranger, sent to my house, with a forwarding label to Chloe at a random address I didn't know? It felt like I had stumbled into the middle of something deeply shady. Was she involved in something illegal? Was she receiving stolen goods? My mind raced, trying to construct a scenario that didn't involve my best friend being a criminal. I frantically tried calling her again. Still voicemail, texting, no response. I sat there, staring at the box, staring at the conflicting labels, feeling a profound sense of unease. This one seemingly innocent favor, asking to receive a package, had just pulled back a corner of a curtain I didn't even know was there. And I had a terrible feeling that what was hidden behind it was going to be far, far worse than just a flaky friend or a weird package. I had no idea how deep this went, or how it connected to the decade of trust we had built. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this box was the first thread of a lie so tangled and vast, it was about to consume everything. My heart was pounding. Staring at that package, addressed to me but clearly not for me, with that weird forwarding label to Chloe, and then the original label underneath for some guy named David Miller. It was like a cold dose of reality. Hit me. The elaborate excuses over the past few days suddenly didn't feel like flakiness anymore. They felt like avoidance. Like she was buying time. I grabbed my phone again, fingers shaking, and tried calling Chloe one more time. Straight to voicemail again. Her mailbox was full. Okay, that's weird. She never let her mailbox fill up. I sent her a text. Hey, Chloe. Seriously, what is going on with this package? It's not even addressed to you and there's a forwarding label. Can you please just call me? No reply. Not even the little read receipt showed up. She had either blocked me or she was deliberately ignoring me. The second option felt worse. I paced my apartment, the box feeling like a ticking time bomb. What was in it? Why David Miller? Why send it here first? Was she mixed up in something illegal? Was I now mixed up in something illegal by receiving it? My mind was spinning with terrible possibilities. Money laundering? Drugs? Stolen goods? She was an artist. Maybe it was some kind of art forgery ring? It sounded ridiculous, but the feeling of dread was so intense, I couldn't think straight. Then, as I was still staring at the box, trying to decide what to do, the mail truck pulled up. I hadn't checked my mail yet that day. I walked downstairs, my hands clammy, and opened my mailbox. It was mostly junk mail and a few bills, but tucked in with them was a thick envelope from a bank I didn't have an account with. First National Bank of Georgia. That was weird. I opened it. It was a pre-approved credit card offer, addressed to Amanda Jenkins. That wasn't me. My name is Amanda Reynolds. Jenkins. That name didn't mean anything to me. I frowned. Mistakes happen, I guess. Junk mail gets misdelivered all the time. But then I saw another envelope from a different bank, addressed to Amanda Jenkins. At my address, and another. And then a notification from a credit monitoring service I'd never signed up for, saying there was a new account opened under a name similar to mine at my address. Okay, this was beyond misdelivery. This was multiple things, all with a variation of my name coming to my address, within minutes of discovering that strange package. My blood ran cold. Amanda Jenkins. David Miller. Who were these people? And why were things addressed to them showing up at my house? I ran back upstairs, my heart now hammering against my ribs. I dropped the mail on the kitchen counter and went back to the box. I looked at the labels again. My name, my address, the forwarding label to Chloe and Marietta, the original label to David Miller. It felt like pieces of a horrifying puzzle were starting to scatter around me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those labels, those names, those weird credit card offers. I got up and sat at my laptop. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I checked my credit report. I used one of the free services. Logging in felt like entering a haunted house. I clicked through the pages, my eyes scanning for anything unusual. At first it looked normal. My few credit cards, my student loan, my car loan, everything looked fine, until I scrolled down. There, listed under New Accounts, was a credit card from Capital One, opened 2 months ago. I hadn't opened a Capital One card. My stomach dropped. Then another one. A Discover card, opened 3 months ago. I didn't have a Discover card. And another. And another. There were 5 new credit cards listed, all opened within the last 6 months. All in my name. My hands were shaking, so hard I could barely hold the mouse. I scrolled further. Under Inquiries, there were dozens of recent inquiries from banks and lenders I didn't recognize. Credit checks for loans, for lines of credit, for who knows what else. Then I saw it. A personal loan for $15,000, taken out 4 months ago. In my name. At an address that wasn't mine. It was the address listed on the forwarding label on the package. The address in Marietta, Chloe's address. A wave of nausea washed over me. It wasn't just strange mail. It wasn't just mixed up packages. This was my name. My credit. My life being used. It wasn't David Miller or Amanda Jenkins. It was me. Or rather, someone pretending to be me. And that someone lived at the address on the forwarding label. Chloe's address. It clicked. The pieces slammed together with a sickening force. Chloe hadn't asked to send a package to me. She had asked to send a package through me, using my address as a seemingly legitimate stop-off point, maybe to make it harder to trace the origin, or maybe to just use a verified residential address that belonged to someone with good credit and no red flags on their name. Me. And the expensive art supplies story? A lie. A complete fabrication to explain the high value of whatever was in the box addressed to David Miller, being forwarded. To her? The weird favors over the years? Can I get a package sent to your place? Probably testing the waters, seeing if I'd question it. Can you use your Amazon? Maybe gathering linked information. Can I look at your bank app on your phone? Terrifying in retrospect. Her intense curiosity about my finances? Not idle chat. She was building a target profile. My social security number she saw when helping with rental applications. My birthday. My mom's maiden name. My first pet. All the security questions. Everything she knew about me, she had seemingly weaponized. All those financial struggles she claimed to have. Were they real? Or was she spending money she was fraudulently obtaining in my name? The inconsistencies in her stories, the sudden emergencies, the need for cash. It wasn't just bad luck or the struggle of an artist. It was likely the pressure of keeping up a charade, of managing multiple fake accounts, maybe paying minimums to keep things from collapsing too soon, or just spending wildly. I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. The person I had trusted with everything, the person I called my best friend for a decade, the person who knew me better than almost anyone else, was systematically destroying my financial life. She hadn't just stolen my identity. She had stolen my sense of safety, my belief in our history, the 10 years we had shared. It was all tainted now. Everything. I sat there for hours, numb, scrolling through my credit report, seeing the damage pile up. Loan after loan, card after card, inquiry after inquiry. The dates synced up perfectly with the periods when she was complaining about being broke, when she was asking for little favors, when she seemed unusually interested in my money. It wasn't a recent thing. It had been happening for months, maybe even longer. The package was just the first physical manifestation of a digital betrayal that had been ongoing, hidden in plain sight. I didn't know the full extent yet. I didn't know about utility bills, or leases, or anything else. But what I saw in that credit report was enough to make me physically ill. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, malicious. And it was done by Chloe, my best friend. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. She hadn't just been struggling. She had been calculating, and I had been the perfect mark. The next few days were a blur of panic, disbelief, and a cold, simmering rage. After seeing that credit report, I was a wreck. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My apartment, once my safe haven, felt contaminated. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of Chloe, photos of us laughing together, little gifts she'd given me over the years, even the sad, lopsided pot we made in that first pottery class. Every single thing felt like a lie. I started pulling out every piece of weird mail I'd ever received. Those credit card offers addressed to Amanda Jenkins. I looked closer. The middle initial was mine. The birthday listed was mine. The social security number was not visible on the offer itself, thankfully, but the pattern was undeniable. It was me, but slightly altered, or perhaps my details were being used to support a fake variation of my identity. I dug through old paperwork. Rental applications we'd filled out together. Remember how I said she sat with me, helping me fill mine out? And saw my social security number? Yeah. That wasn't just a casual observation. She was cataloging. I found old utility bills from my previous apartments that she had helped me set up online when I first moved to Atlanta. She knew my account numbers, my service addresses. I found records of splitting bills online where my credit card number was entered. She knew everything. My initial thought was just the credit cards and the personal loan. Bad enough, right? But the dread wouldn't go away. What else had she done? I started digging deeper. I pulled my report from all 3 major credit bureaus. They all showed the same fraudulent credit cards and the $15,000 loan. But one report had something new. A listing for a utility account, opened about 8 months prior, for electricity service at an address in Marietta. The same address as the forwarding label. In my name. Okay, utility bills. What else? Could she have opened bank accounts, applied for jobs, signed leases? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. I tried logging into any online service I could think of that required a social security number or sensitive info, healthcare portals, government sites, anything. I found a notification that my email address had been changed on a few random shopping websites I rarely used. Small things, but they felt like tiny tendrils of her reach, constantly testing boundaries. I spent hours on the phone, hours on hold with banks, explaining the situation. Each call was agonizing. Having to recount the story, having them ask verifying questions, feeling like I had to prove my own identity was mine, not the fraudulent one being used. They initiated investigations, flagged the accounts. It was a slow, bureaucratic nightmare. The $15,000 loan was the most devastating financially. That kind of debt, opened in my name, was crushing. The bank was sympathetic but firm. I had to file a police report. That felt like a whole new level of hell. Reporting my best friend to the police. I contacted the utility company. Yes, an account had been opened in my name at that Marietta address. They gave me the start date. It lined up almost exactly with a period when Chloe had been particularly stressed about money and complaining about needing to move to a cheaper place. Had she moved there and just put the utilities in my name from day one? It seemed insane. The pattern was becoming horrifyingly clear. It wasn't random. It was systematic. She was using my excellent credit history, my stable life, my personal information that she had collected over years of seemingly innocent friendship to build a fake life for herself, or at least manage her expenses entirely on my dime. Every red flag I had dismissed over the years came flooding back, amplified by the horrific truth. Her constant money problems, not just struggles, but maybe needing cash to make minimum payments on accounts she'd opened in my name or just funding her lifestyle. Her interest in my finances, checking how much room she had to run up debt on my credit lines. The weird packages, part of the process of getting goods or money obtained fraudulently. The competitiveness, maybe fueled by resentment that I had. The stability she craved, and she felt entitled to take it. The sheer scale of the deception was overwhelming. How long had this been going on? When did it start? Was it a sudden decision? Or had she been planning this for years? Had our entire friendship been a long con, a slow, deliberate process of harvesting my identity? That thought was the most painful of all. 10 years. A decade of shared life, laughter, tears, support. Was it all fake? Was I just a resource to be exploited? Every time I discovered a new fraudulent account, a new bill, a new inquiry, it felt like another stab in the back. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the profound violation of trust. It was the realization that the person I had leaned on, confided in, and loved like a sister was capable of such cold, calculated cruelty. I remember sitting on my floor surrounded by papers, credit reports, bank statements, the real ones and the fake ones, utility bills, that damn package box. I looked at a photo of me and Chloe laughing hysterically at a party a few years ago. She had her arm around me, her smile wide and genuine. Or so I thought. Was she thinking about my credit score in that moment? Was she mentally calculating how much she could get away with? The anger started to build. A hot, protective anger. Not just for the financial mess, but for the utter disrespect, the betrayal, the damage done to my sense of reality. She hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen my peace of mind, my security, my faith in people. I knew I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't just fix the damage and move on as if our decade-long friendship had simply faded away. It hadn't faded. It had exploded in a fireball of fraud and deception. I had to confront her. I had to look her in the eye, or at least hear her voice, and demand answers. I needed to understand how she could do this, how she, the person who had been my rock, my confidant, could systematically dismantle my life without a flicker of remorse. The thought of facing her made my stomach clench, but I knew it was the only way I could even begin to process this nightmare. I had to face the architect of my ruin. Okay, gathering all that evidence, the credit reports, the bank statements, the utility bills, the package, piecing together the timeline. It took days. Days spent oscillating between absolute fury and gut-wrenching sadness. Days where I barely functioned, just staring blankly at walls or frantically searching online for what to do if your best friend steals your identity. Spoiler, there aren't many helpful articles for that specific scenario. By the end of that week, I had a stack of paper evidence that looked like a small mountain. I had documented everything I could find, highlighted the fraudulent accounts, matched dates, connected the dots between her struggles and the timeline of the fraud. I felt like a detective in my own life, and the prime suspect was the person who was supposed to be my alibi. I knew I had to confront her. Part of me wanted to just send everything to the police and disappear from her life forever. But the decade of history, the depth of the betrayal, demanded something more. I needed to hear it from her. I needed to see if there was any flicker of the person I thought I knew, any explanation, any remorse. Call me stupid, but a tiny, desperate part of me still couldn't fully grasp that the Chloe I loved was capable of this. Maybe it was a terrible mistake. Maybe she was forced into it. Maybe there was some convoluted reason. Yeah, wishful thinking. But I had to try. I decided to call her. An in-person confrontation felt too dangerous, too unpredictable. I didn't know what she was capable of now that her scheme was potentially exposed. So I blocked my number. I didn't want her to see it was me and not answer. It rang, and rang, and rang. Just as I was about to hang up, thinking she wasn't going to answer, her voice came on the line. Hello? She sounded a little wary. My heart was hammering. My mouth felt dry. I took a deep breath. Chloe, it's Amanda. Silence. A long, thick, heavy silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing. Amanda, she finally said, her voice flat, devoid of the usual warmth or cheerfulness. No, hey stranger, where have you been? No fake enthusiasm. Just my name. Chloe. I started, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk. About the package. Another pause. Then a sigh. Oh. Right. The package. Look, I'm really sorry about that. Things have been crazy here. I'll come get it tomorrow, I promise. It was the same flaky excuse she'd been using for days. But now it felt different. Now it felt like a deliberate lie to keep the truth hidden. Don't lie to me, Chloe, I said, my voice cracking slightly despite my efforts. I know it wasn't. Just a package. I looked. I saw the forwarding label. I saw the original label. It wasn't for you. It was for someone else. And I've seen other things too. Her tone shifted instantly. The slightly apologetic flakiness vanished, replaced by a cold defensive edge. What other things? What are you talking about? Why are you going through my mail? Your mail? Chloe, it came to my address. It was addressed to me. My voice was rising now. And while I was looking at that, I started looking at other things, like my credit report. Silence again. This time, it was different. Not the confused silence of someone caught off guard, but the tense silence of someone who knew they were cornered. "Chloe," I pushed, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. I know about the credit cards. I know about the loan. I know about the utility bills. All in my name. All tied to your address in Marietta. How could you? How could you do this?" Then, the performance started. "Oh my God, Amanda, what are you talking about?" Her voice suddenly sounded shaky, tearful. That's crazy. Credit cards? Loans? I would never. Why would you even think that?" The gaslighting began immediately. "Because it's right here. In black and white," I almost yelled into the phone. "My credit report is a disaster. There are 5 credit cards and a $15,000 loan, all opened in my name. And they're linked to your address. Don't you dare tell me you didn't do this." She started crying, loud, dramatic sobs that felt completely fake. "How can you accuse me of this? After 10 years? After everything we've been through? I can't believe you would think I would do something like this. This is insane. Someone else must have gotten your information. Maybe it was that terrible ex of yours. Or someone at your job. Why are you blaming me?" "Because all the evidence points to you, Chloe," I retorted, my voice hoarse. "The package, the address, the timing of when the accounts were opened lining up with when you were desperate for money, everything you knew about me. You knew my social security number. You knew my birthday. You knew everything you needed. Knowing someone's birthday doesn't mean you can steal their identity," she shrieked, her fake tears turning into defensive anger. "You're being paranoid. Amanda, you're imagining things. Or maybe you opened those accounts yourself and forgot. Are you on something? Have you been drinking?" The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall of her trying to turn it back on me, question my sanity, my sobriety. It was infuriating. But under the anger was a profound sadness. This wasn't the friend I knew. This was a stranger. A cruel, manipulative stranger. "Stop lying, Chloe," I said, my voice flat and cold now. All emotion drained away, replaced by a chilling resolve. "I have proof. I have everything documented. I've already started reporting the fraud. The banks are investigating. I'm filing a police report." That got her attention. Her crying stopped abruptly. "A police report?" she whispered, a tremor of actual fear in her voice. "Yes," I said firmly, "a police report for identity theft. And you are the person I'm reporting." There was a long silence. I could almost hear her mind racing, calculating. And then the mask dropped completely. The tearful friend, the indignant victim. It all vanished. Her voice, when she spoke again, was hard, cold, and filled with something that sounded a lot like satisfaction. "Fine," she said, her voice low. "Report me. See where that gets you." "Why, Chloe?" I pleaded, the last vestiges of my hope for an explanation crumbling. "Why would you do this to me? To us? After 10 years? She scoffed. It wasn't a friendly scoff. It was bitter, resentful. "Why? Because you had everything, Amanda. You always did. The stable job, the good credit, the nice apartment, the perfect little life. While I was struggling, barely making rent, scraping by. You thought you were helping me? Lending me money? Buying me groceries? That was nothing. You had so much and you barely even noticed. You were so smug, so naive." My jaw dropped. Smug? Naive? I had been her friend. I had helped her out of genuine care. "This wasn't about need, Chloe," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This was about destroying me." "Maybe it was," she said, and there was that chilling, satisfaction again. Maybe I just wanted to see you finally struggle. See that perfect little life fall apart. You made it so easy, Amanda. Giving me all your information, trusting me completely. It was almost too easy. The coldness in her voice was staggering. The complete lack of remorse, the open admission of malicious intent. The decade of friendship, the shared secrets, the laughter, the tears. It was all a performance. I wasn't her friend. I was her mark, her target, her revenge. You're sick, I said, the words feeling inadequate, hollow. Maybe, she replied, but you're the one left cleaning up the mess. And with that, she hung up. I stood there, phone still, in hand, listening to the dial tone. The conversation was over. The friendship was over. The illusion was shattered, leaving behind only the devastating reality of betrayal and malice. There were no more explanations to be had from her, only the wreckage she had left behind. I was alone, facing the monumental task of rebuilding my life, piece by painful piece, from the ground up. I stood there, in the middle of my living room, the phone still buzzing faintly in my hand after she hung up. The silence that followed her final words was deafening. You made it so easy, Amanda. Giving me all your information, trusting me completely. It was almost too easy. The casual cruelty of it, the chilling admission. It echoed in the empty space where my friendship with Chloe used to be. My best friend, my sister, had seen my life, my stability, my hard work, not with joy or even simple acceptance, but with bitter resentment. She didn't want to celebrate my successes. She wanted to dismantle them. She didn't want to build her own life. She wanted to steal mine. The thought was so monstrous, so alien to everything I thought I knew about her, that it was hard to reconcile with the image of the person who had sat with me through breakups, celebrated my small victories, and laughed until we cried over terrible pottery, smug, naive. I replayed her words in my head. Was that how she saw me? Was my careful budgeting, my steady job, my ability to save a little money each month, perceived not as diligence but as some kind of offensive smugness? Was my trust in her, my willingness to help her out when she was struggling, seen not as friendship, but as naive gullibility to be exploited? It twisted everything I thought I knew about our past. All those times I helped her out, buying her groceries, spotting her rent, lending her cash. I had genuinely believed I was supporting a friend through tough times. But through her eyes, was it just me flaunting what I had? When I got that slightly better paying job in 2013, or when I finally had enough saved for a small down payment idea in 2018, and she immediately launched into her own financial crises. It wasn't just poor timing or needing to vent. It was resentment boiling over, quickly redirected to make me feel guilty or dampen my own good news. I had rationalized it as her struggling, needing support. Now I saw it was pure, toxic envy. That conversation about her business loan application, sitting with her, practically filling out the form myself because she claimed to be confused. That wasn't confusion. That was her ensuring I saw, confirmed, and maybe even input her most sensitive details, while subtly getting access to mine under the guise of helping her. She was collecting data points, building her arsenal, and the packages, the mailroom renovation. That wasn't about delivery issues. That was likely about having a legitimate, unsuspicious address. My address. The address of a person with good credit and no red flags, as a waypoint for receiving goods or documents related to her fraudulent activities. Maybe she was ordering things with stolen credit cards, mine or others, having them shipped to me, then forwarding them to herself. Maybe it was documentation related to the fake loan or credit accounts. The possibilities were sickening. The resentment must have been simmering for years. A slow burn of envy and perceived injustice. She saw my steady life as a personal affront. something she was entitled to take pieces from because her own path was harder, or because she made poorer choices. She painted me as the villain in her head, the smug, naive friend who had it easy, to justify her actions. It wasn't about need. She said it herself. Maybe I just wanted to see you finally. Struggle. That was the core of it. Cruelty, revenge, seeing my life fall apart. It wasn't just the financial damage anymore. That was immense, sure, but the emotional and psychological damage was profound. This wasn't a stranger who stole my identity from some dark corner of the internet. This was Chloe, my best friend, the person whose shoulder I had cried on, who had celebrated my triumphs, who knew my family, my history, my deepest insecurities. The level of betrayal was a physical weight in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every shared memory felt tainted. Was she secretly resenting me during that weekend trip to Charleston? When we were laughing at that terrible movie, was she thinking about my bank account balance? When she was my emergency contact, was she just ensuring she had access to my most critical information? It was like looking back at a photo album of my life and seeing her standing there, smiling, but realizing now that behind the smile was a predator, sizing me up. The grief was overwhelming. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my financial stability. I was mourning the death of a decade-long friendship. Mourning the death of the person I thought Chloe was. Mourning the loss of my own innocence and trust. You walk through the world assuming a basic level of decency, especially from the people you choose to bring closest. When that assumption is shattered by the person you trusted most, it leaves you feeling exposed, vulnerable, and profoundly alone. How do you trust anyone again after this? How do you share details of your life without constantly wondering if they'll be used against you? How do you distinguish genuine kindness from calculated manipulation? Chloe hadn't just stolen my identity. She had stolen my peace of mind. I spent the next few days feeling like I was moving through thick fog. The world felt muffled, unreal. I would burst into tears unexpectedly, or feel sudden waves of white-hot anger. I wanted to scream, to lash, out, to make her feel a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. But mostly I just felt numb, hollowed out. I looked around my apartment. Every item seemed to carry a memory of her. That mug she gave me, that painting we bought together at an art fair, the couch we'd spent hours on, talking about everything and nothing. They were physical reminders of a relationship that was a lie. I felt like I needed to cleanse my space, my life, of her presence. But first, I had to deal with the practical reality of the disaster she had created. The confrontation was over. There was no remorse, no explanation that could justify her actions, just the raw, ugly truth of her resentment and malice. Now, the real fight began. The fight to reclaim my name, my credit, my future. The fight to claw my way back from the financial and emotional abyss she had pushed me into. The fight to prove that her twisted desire to see my life fall apart wouldn't succeed. It was going to be a long, arduous battle, and I was completely on my own. Okay, so the emotional devastation was one thing. The sheer shock and hurt of realizing my best friend was a con artist motivated by pure spite. That was shattering. But then came the practical reality. The mountain of actual work required to undo the damage. It was overwhelming, demoralizing, and frankly, terrifying. The first step, everyone tells you, is to file a police report. Even saying the words felt surreal. I need to file a police report for identity theft against my best friend. Walking into the police station felt like entering a foreign country. I sat in a sterile waiting room, clutching my binder full of evidence like it was a shield. When I finally got to talk to an officer, recounting the story felt humiliating. Explaining how someone I knew for 10 years, someone I trusted completely, had systematically gathered my information and used it to open accounts, take out loans, put utilities in my name. It made me feel like the world's biggest idiot. The officer was professional, sympathetic enough, but ultimately, it felt like just another case in a long line of identity theft victims. They took my statement, looked through my binder, nodded, and gave me a case number. They explained they would investigate, but identity theft cases, especially involving personal relationships, could be complex. It wasn't like they were going to send a SWAT team to Chloe's apartment immediately. This wasn't a quick fix. This was a process. A slow, grinding, bureaucratic process. Armed with the police report number, the next step was contacting the credit bureaus again. This time, with the official report, I could place a fraud alert on my credit file. This means businesses have to take extra steps to verify my identity before opening new accounts. It was a crucial step, but it also made simple things like applying for a new phone plan or even signing up for a store credit card suddenly much harder, requiring extra phone calls and documentation. It felt like I was being punished, flagged, as a risk because of her actions. Then came the nightmare of dealing with each individual fraudulent account. I had to call each bank, each lender, each utility company listed on my credit report. Every call started the same way. I'm calling to report fraudulent activity on an account opened in my name. And then, the endless hold times, the repeating of my story to different representatives, faxing or uploading copies of the police report and my ID, filling out fraud affidavits for each account. There was a fraudulent credit card from Capital, one with a balance of over $5,000, a Discover card with nearly $8,000 on it, another one from Chase for $3,000, the $15,000 personal loan, the utility account with Georgia Power for hundreds of dollars in unpaid bills. Each one felt like a separate battle. Some companies were easier to deal with than others. Some immediately acknowledged the fraud and started the process of removing the debt from my report. Others were more difficult, requiring extensive documentation and follow-up. I learned the hard way that even with a police report, you are still responsible for proving you are the victim. It's not guilty until proven innocent. It's fraudulent until you prove it wasn't you. I had to dispute every single charge on those credit card statements, every single withdrawal from the loan account, which she had apparently linked to some random bank account. It was meticulous, painstaking work. Looking at the statements was like getting punched repeatedly. Seeing purchases for things I knew Chloe would buy, art supplies, takeout food, clothes from boutiques I knew she liked. It was sickeningly personal. It wasn't just a list of numbers. It was a record of her living her life, while simultaneously destroying mine. The $15,000 loan was the most complex. The bank needed proof that I wasn't living at that address in Marietta, proof that the signatures on the loan documents weren't mine. Thankfully, I had my lease agreement for my Atlanta apartment, utility bills in my name for my address, and a notarized statement verifying my residency. But still, the process took months. Hearing the bank tell me, well, the signature looks very similar to your signature on file, even though I hadn't signed anything, was terrifying. It made me realize how easily identity can be faked, how vulnerable you are. Beyond the financial institutions, there were other potential layers of identity theft. Had she used my name for anything else? A lease? A car loan? Had she applied for government benefits? Health insurance? It felt like I had to constantly be vigilant, checking everything, signing up for every free monitoring service I could find, just waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next piece of evidence of her betrayal to surface. The emotional toll during this period was immense. I felt a deep sense of shame, even though I knew logically I hadn't done anything wrong. I felt stupid for trusting her, for not seeing the signs, for making it easy. That phrase from her kept echoing in my head. It made me question my judgment, my intuition, everything. Talking about it was hard. How do you explain to people that your best friend of 10 years systematically stole your identity? It sounded unbelievable, like something out of a movie. Some people were sympathetic, others seemed skeptical, or offered unhelpful advice like, "How could you let that happen?" The isolation was profound. The person I would have normally turned to for support, for comfort, was the source of my pain. I avoided mutual friends, not knowing who she might have talked to, not wanting to have to explain, or worse, hear them, defend her or doubt me. My world shrunk. I focused solely on the task at hand, cleaning up the mess. Every day was a battle, disputing charges, writing letters, sitting on hold, documenting conversations, waiting for responses. It was exhausting, emotionally draining work on top of my already demanding job. There were moments of despair when I looked at the stack of paperwork, the balances on the fraudulent accounts, the ding on my credit score, and felt like I would never dig myself out. Like she had won. Like her twisted goal of seeing my life fall apart was actually succeeding. But then, the anger would return. That protective fire. I wasn't going to let her win. This was my life, mine identity, and I was going to fight tooth and nail to reclaim it. The process was agonizingly slow, but I had started. I had taken the first steps to untangle the web of lies she had woven around me. Picking up the pieces wasn't a quick fix. It was a marathon. After the initial wave of reporting the fraud and placing alerts, the real grind began. The painstaking, often frustrating process of disputing each individual fraudulent item on my credit reports and dealing with the fallout. This wasn't just about removing debt. It was about erasing her presence from my financial history, piece by painful piece. Every month, I'd pull my credit reports from all three bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They rarely updated at the same time, and disputing an item with one bureau didn't automatically clear it with the others. I had to file separate disputes with each one, for each fraudulent account. That meant writing letters, sending certified mail, because I needed proof they received it, uploading documents online, and waiting. The waiting was the worst part. Weeks would go by with no updates, and I'd feel stuck, like the process had stalled. Sometimes, even after disputing an item, it would reappear on my report weeks or months later, listed as verified. This happened with the personal loan multiple times. I'd send all my evidence again, the police report, my residency proof, my affidavit, and the cycle would repeat. It felt like I was constantly yelling into a void, trying to convince automated systems and overworked customer service reps that I wasn't a fraudster trying to get out of debt, but a victim trying to reclaim my name. Collections agencies started calling. Because payments weren't being made on the fraudulent accounts, some debts were sold to collectors. Getting calls from aggressive debt collectors demanding payment for money she had stolen in my name was incredibly stressful. I'd have to explain the situation, provide the police report number, tell them it was identity theft, and instruct them to cease communication and deal directly with the credit bureaus or the original creditor. Some understood. Others were relentless, calling at all hours. I learned to record the dates and times of calls, the names of the collectors, and send them certified letters demanding they stop calling. It felt like I was constantly defending myself against the ghost of debts I never incurred. The legal side of things was complicated. Filing the police report was necessary for disputing the fraud, but whether criminal charges would be filed against Chloe was another matter. The police investigated, but the wheels of justice turned slowly. Proving intent, building a strong enough case for a prosecutor, it wasn't guaranteed. And even if she was charged, it wouldn't automatically erase the damage from my credit report or compensate me for the time and stress. I consulted with a lawyer specializing in identity theft. They explained my options, including potentially suing Chloe in civil court to recover damages, but that would be expensive, time-consuming, and given her apparent financial state, or lack thereof, built on my money, Recovering anything substantial was unlikely. Ultimately, I focused on what I could control, cleaning up my credit reports. That meant vigilance, persistence, and a never-ending stack of paperwork. Every time an item was successfully removed, it felt like a small victory, a tiny bit of my life being restored. But it was exhausting. Mentally, emotionally, and even physically, from the sheer amount of time spent on the phone and at my desk dealing with it all. This process took months, stretching into over a year, maybe even longer before my credit reports were truly clean. Even then, the inquiries from when she applied for accounts stayed on my report for 2 years. Future lenders seeing dozens of hard inquiries might wonder why, requiring further explanation. It felt like a permanent stain, a reminder of what happened. The impact on my life went beyond the immediate financial hit. It affected my ability to plan for the future. I had dreamed of buying a small condo, of having a stable place to call my own. With my credit score trashed, getting approved for a mortgage was impossible. Even simple things like getting approved for a new apartment lease if I ever needed to move, or getting a better rate on car insurance became potential hurdles. It felt like her actions had put my life on hold. Beyond the practical, the emotional scars remained. The betrayal left a deep wound. Trusting people became incredibly difficult. I became paranoid about sharing information, even simple things. I constantly checked my bank accounts, my mail, online logins. I felt like I was always looking over my shoulder, waiting for another shoe to drop, even years later. The feeling of security I once had was gone. The story wasn't just about the money she stole, it was about the life she tried to steal. The sense of safety, the ability to trust, the peace of mind. Fighting to get my life back wasn't just about disputing fraudulent charges. It was about rebuilding my confidence, my sense of security, my belief that the world isn't just full of people waiting to take advantage of you. It was a long, hard fight, and even after the credit reports were clean, the scars of the betrayal were a permanent reminder of the decade-long lie I had lived. Completely unaware I was sharing my life with someone who saw me only as a means to an end. Cleaning up the mess Chloe made, trying to reclaim my identity and my financial life, that wasn't just a process. It was a full-time job on top of my actual full-time job. For over a year, maybe closer to 2, I was living in a state of constant vigilance and administrative hell. Every spare moment felt consumed by paperwork, phone calls, and checking reports. Even after I got the major fraudulent accounts cleared and my credit score started slowly, painstakingly, climbing back towards health, the sense of unease didn't go away. Identity theft isn't just a one-and-done event. It leaves you hyper-aware, constantly scanning for threats. I signed up for every free credit monitoring service I could find. I checked my bank accounts multiple times a day. I scrutinized every piece of mail, terrified of seeing another name, another weird offer addressed to me that wasn't me. Logging into any online account that held sensitive information felt like a risk. I changed passwords everywhere, enabled 2-factor authentication on absolutely everything. I locked down my credit with freezes at all 3 bureaus. A necessary step, but one that added layers of hassle every time I needed to apply for anything legitimate, like renting a car for a trip or opening a new phone line. It felt like I was living behind financial barbed wire, all because the person I trusted most had walked right through the front door and trashed the place. The emotional impact lingered long after the last fraudulent charge was removed. That feeling of betrayal, it doesn't just go away. It changes you. It makes you question everyone. Every new person I met. Every time someone asked for even a minor piece of personal information, my gut would clench. Were they collecting data? Were they testing me? It sounds paranoid, I know. But when the person you shared your life with for a decade turned out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, it warps your perception of human nature. I struggled with sleep, often waking up in a cold sweat after nightmares, where I was drowning in debt or running from debt collectors I couldn't outrun. Stress manifested physically. Constant headaches, digestive issues, a perpetual knot of anxiety in my stomach. Therapy helped. Talking through the trauma, the betrayal, the erosion of trust with a professional was crucial. It helped me understand that I wasn't stupid or naive for trusting Chloe. I was a normal person who believed in the goodness of someone I loved. And she was the one with the pathological capacity for deception. It wasn't my fault she chose to be a terrible person. That distinction was vital for rebuilding my self-worth, which had been shattered. And Chloe? What happened with her legally? The police did investigate. They contacted her. She denied everything, of course, despite the mountain of evidence I had provided, including the forwarded package addressed to David Miller at her address and the utility bills in my name also at that address. She claimed she had no idea how my information ended up on loan applications or utility accounts linked to her address. More lies. More gaslighting. Because the fraud happened across different jurisdictions, my initial address, her Marietta address, wherever the banks were located, and involved digital trails that can be complex to follow, and because I wasn't a multi-million-dollar corporation but just an individual victim, the case moved slowly. Eventually, charges were filed against her. Not as many as I felt were warranted, but felony identity theft charges related to the loan and some of the credit cards. Was there a big dramatic trial? No. Most identity theft cases don't end that way. Facing the evidence, her public defender likely advised her it was an uphill battle. To avoid prison time, she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to a reduced set of charges. She received probation, mandatory restitution payments, which, let's be real, were a joke. I never saw a dime of the tens of thousands she owed me, and probably never will, and was ordered to have no contact with me. Hearing she wasn't going to jail, that she got off with what felt like a slap on the wrist compared to the devastation she'd caused, was frustrating. But the truth is, even if she had gone to prison, it wouldn't have fixed my credit or erased the trauma. The legal outcome, while necessary for accountability on paper, didn't provide the emotional closure I maybe, stupidly, still craved. There was no moment of her apologizing, no explanation beyond the bitter resentment she'd revealed on the phone. The no-contact order meant I would never get that face-to-face reckoning I'd once thought I needed. She was just gone from my life, leaving behind a trail of destruction. So what did I learn from all of this? A lot of painful lessons. 1. Trust, especially deep, implicit trust, needs to be earned over time, but it also needs boundaries. I was an open book with Chloe. I shared everything. Financial details, personal, history, the answers to security questions without even realizing that's what they were. Because she was my best friend, I never saw those details as vulnerabilities. Now I understand that even with people you love, there are certain pieces of information that need to be protected. It's not about not trusting them. It's about protecting yourself in a world where identity is currency. 2. Listen to your gut. Those little flickers I mentioned early on, the inconsistencies in her stories, the weird favors, the feeling of being drained after spending time with her when she was in one of her crises. My intuition was trying to tell me something was off, but I rationalized it away because I didn't want to believe anything negative about my friend. If something feels wrong, even if you can't articulate exactly why, pay attention. Investigate. Don't let emotional attachment blind you to warning signs. 3. Red flags aren't always bright, obvious banners. Sometimes they're just subtle shifts, tiny cracks in the facade. A friend who is constantly, perpetually in crisis? A friend who seems overly interested in your financial situation compared to their own? A friend whose stories about why they need help never quite add up? These aren't definitive proof of malice, of course, but in retrospect, they were consistent indicators that something wasn't right beneath the surface. 4. Be your own advocate. When this happened, I felt like I was drowning. The system for dealing with identity theft is complex and frustrating. No one is going to care about cleaning up your life as much as you are. You have to be persistent, organized, and willing to fight for yourself, even when you feel exhausted and defeated. That binder of evidence I built, that was my armor. Years have passed now since I discovered the fraud. My credit is restored. I was finally able to buy that small condo I dreamed of, a place that feels truly mine and safe. The financial damage has for the most part been repaired. But the emotional scars? They remain. I am more guarded, more cautious. I still check my credit reports religiously. The automatic trust I used to extend to people is gone, replaced by a more measured, cautious approach. And part of me still grapples with the why. How could a person I loved so deeply harbor such intense resentment and act on it so cruelly? That question, I suspect, will never have a satisfying answer. Sharing this story, unpacking it all for you, has been incredibly difficult, dredging up pain I'd buried deep. But I wanted to share it because I know I'm not the only one who's experienced betrayal. Maybe not to this extreme extent, but betrayal by someone they trusted. And I wanted to show that even when your life feels completely derailed by someone else's actions, you can fight your way back. It's a long, hard battle, and the scars are real. But you can reclaim your life. You can rebuild. And you can find strength you didn't know you had in the process. My decade-long friendship with Chloe ended in a nightmare of lies and theft, but it taught me the most brutal, most important lesson of all. The only person you can truly be responsible for protecting in the end is yourself. Stay vigilant. Y'all, protect your peace, protect your information, and for the love of all that is good, listen to those gut feelings. They're trying to save you. And so, here we are, at the quiet edge of it all. The words have been spoken, the tangled threads laid bare under the dim light of truth. It feels strange, like finally setting down a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying until just now, as I told you about it. It was heavy, wasn't it? The deception, the layers of lies woven into years of my life, into a friendship that should have been a sanctuary, but turned into this. But telling it, just saying it out loud to you, whoever you are listening out, there in the quiet, it brings a different kind of peace. Not forgiveness, not yet maybe, but clarity. A settling. The shadows that flickered around the edges for so long, the red flags I dismissed as my own anxiety, my own overthinking. They solidified into something real, something I could finally see, finally understand, and finally, just release. Maybe the only real lesson etched in my heart is this simple, complicated thing. Trust your gut. That quiet hum of unease, that little voice whispering that something isn't quite right. Listen to it. Tend to your own garden first, because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can cause the most profound disruption. But even then, even after the storm, the ground is still there. You can still rebuild. You can still find your footing again, stronger this time, rooted deeper in the knowledge of what happened and the quiet strength it took to walk through it. As the night deepens around us and the echoes of the story begin to fade, I hope you find your own peace tonight. It's okay to let it drift now, to let the heavy parts float away like smoke. The telling is done. The truth is out. And here, in the quiet, all that's left is the space to just be, to breathe, to rest. And with that, our story closes. I hope it brought you some perspective, or at least a captivating escape. Sleep deeply,